Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Mayan Speedplay number 34. We left off in a Regency Council with a 0-year-old heir and invading Ethiopia. The invasion of Ethiopia is going pretty well, as you can see. We're keeping our armies decently clumped up since the Ethiopian army is something like 36,000 men strong, and just kind of chilling to the south of us. There it is right now, so we're going to try to pull our forces at least somewhat together to deal with that. We also mess around with trade a little bit, just siphoning more and more trade out of places in China. And generally just maintain our armies as close together as we can without really making the Ethiopians not attack us. And we do go ahead and just force march into one another, getting a good 48,000 men, which defeats the Ethiopians pretty much with ease and without too much casualties, or too much in the way of casualties. We also go ahead and defeat our rebels and just rush over. We do have a rebellion ongoing in India. However, the Ethiopians do have something of a naval presence, and our main fighting ships are not actually present right now. They're off chilling somewhere off the west coast of Africa. Not quite yet where they need to be. We do go ahead and join some armies together in order to defend against the Ethiopians. Luckily, we beat them to that province. We have a few estate events going on. And we are also going to really be focusing on colonization this episode, just because once this war with Ethiopia is over, there's really not going to be very much we can do besides just tend to our colonies. Now, I was playing around with the idea of maybe removing the mercenary component of our armies, since once this war is over, we're not really going to be fighting very much except for rebels. However, I don't really think that that would be a great idea, just because we do have a considerable amount of money and a low manpower. We do go ahead and see if we can make peace with the Ethiopians right now. We have to reset the war goals. We do go ahead and just kind of piece them together a bit. And it looks as though they will just barely deny. So we're going to hopefully just get them to a point where they're willing to give up as we just siege out these fortless territories. We may as well go for a 100% war score, which we do achieve. All of the areas in the Arabian Peninsula we're just going to give to the Greeks. Now, it's probably impossible, but the goal I had was that we would give the Greeks essentially all of Anatolia and all of the Arabian Peninsula. Tunis will get basically everything just in North Africa, even down into the Sudan area, because there we go, it managed to just give them control over that wasteland, and we just kind of keep passing their control over to various areas, which, one, makes them hate us significantly less, at least temporarily, and two, means we don't actually have to deal with these areas ourselves. With that all said and done, we do have this area still left over. We could give it to Tunis once they finish coring their areas, although I worry that would push them too close to 1,000 development, especially if we do end up going against Kong at any point. Although realistically, we're going to be in this Regency Council for most of the rest of the game, so there really isn't all that much we can do in the way of expansion beyond where we're going to end up in just a few moments. We do also get some events. We send our forces over into India, where there are now two rebellions going on. Luckily, we just have so many forces, and we can do so very little with them in other respects that we just kind of send them all over. At this point, we could possibly scale down our military expenditures, since we really can't do anything offensive with them. However, we have just a great number of troops for really just handling any issue that comes up. Nothing can really affect us just because of the vast scale and reach of our armies. I go ahead and look at some policies we could set, but don't pick any just yet, although eventually we may. We also do go ahead and just funnel our armies around with the support of our navies. We do still have to worry about revolts through all of our vassal territories, as they really probably will not deal with that on their own. We also do manage to toss a couple more provinces over to Tunis, which I think makes a pretty nice looking border for them. So from here, what we're going to do is just release another state, go ahead and turn them to our religion. We can't put any one of our dynasty members on their throne since we are in a Regency Council, a limitation I was not aware existed. And anyway, we just start granting them territories. They have a huge liberty desire because we forced our religion on them, even though no one in the entire country practices it, but by giving them enough people to repress, they kind of get over it. So the question is, are we going to get below 50%? with all the territories available to us, and we barely do. We do keep areas on either side of the Red Sea just so we have direct control over that. No real reason we don't actually really need that, but I do think it's nice, and it gives us a little staging ground no matter what ends up happening, especially if they end up being disloyal or anything of that sort. And with that all said and done, it's basically just back to colonization and rebel hunting, since really those are the two things left available to us without being able to go into war and having already managed our vassals to the extent that we're able. Which means a lot of just moving boats around to try to get decent positions for them. The Brazilians, ever rebellious, are once again rebelling. We can just deal with them with a single army, although a few provinces are going to fall. We do end up taking those policy decisions, since we may as well really focus hard on internals if that's all we're able to actually focus on, which is kind of a redundant and not very... It's almost a tautology. But yeah, since we can only focus on internals, we may as well focus a lot on the internals. So hopefully we'll get a decent portion of the country converted, we'll get most of these wasteland areas filled in, and the various nearly constant revolts, while still going to be, as you see in our new vassal, pretty much near constant and just kind of difficult to manage, for them at least. Since we didn't actually scale down our military, will be pretty easy pickings for us. We just will end up getting one or two provinces occupied for a short duration, which isn't really that much of an issue. And I know that is fairly more than one or two provinces, but the point kind of stands. The Greeks are also getting more rebellions. Honestly, though, it's kind of nice because it breaks up the monotony of just colonizing areas, which is a slightly weird way to feel about rebellions, but does kind of indicate where we're at just as an empire. So it is kind of lucky just for the sense of having something to do that all of this is occurring, and that we're pretty close to the end of the game. We won't really be able to fill out our vassals and make their borders look very nice, which is kind of a downside that I am not too fond of. However, since we don't really have direct control over these areas, and the bits that we do have direct control over are either being colonized to look better or our goals have been met, it isn't really that great of a concern to me. And hopefully we will get a decent understanding of just how much they're able to achieve between now and the end of the game, as for as for converting places to their religion. And it will be interesting to see, now that we are going basically full bore into colonization, how much of the Americas we will manage to finish colonizing before the end. So yeah, it is really just going to be a bit more of this for a moment. We do manage to secure a royal marriage with, I believe it was Tunis. No one else seems to really be down, though, which is vaguely upsetting and kind of odd since they are our dynasty. And yeah, going forward, I did look at the ledger just eventually. I don't put it in the video, but I'll explain some interesting bits. We are by far the highest development country in the world right now, something like 5,000 development, with Austria being second with about 1,600, I want to say. We do not have anywhere near the most manpower capacity. I think we're something like 7th or 8th, although we do have the largest army in the world, almost tied but slightly above the Commonwealth. So our policy of just using tons and tons and tons of mercenaries, while expensive, has honestly been paying dividends in the sense that it's allowed us to really sustain a force far above the level we should be expected to be able to punch. Weirdly enough, we are the second largest nation in terms of naval sailor power. I guess that's redundant, of sailor power, with something like a max of, I think, 25 to 30,000. The country that is the highest is Tunis. Interestingly enough, they still keep all their national ideas and whatnot that allow them to raid people's coastlines. So we're essentially unleashing upon Europe a massive super Tunisian Barbary state that is just plucking up everyone from the Mediterranean and probably parts far beyond, just to sacrifice them to the Mayan gods. Speaking of, we get an event to sacrifice people to the Mayan gods, so it's probably happening a whole lot. Which, I can just imagine how much of a very odd and different Europe this must be, that we're just influencing by such a ridiculously powerful and worrying thing. At any rate, though, that's just me going on quite a bit. We are still dealing with rebellions, although, as you can tell, they're not really the massive vassal-destroying variety that they once were. Our colonization has filled out a lot of the gaps in South America, and while there are a few rebellions still ongoing, they're nothing really all that significant or that large. So it seems as though it is kind of winding down at this point. We do still have something like 7 or 8 years left in the Regency Council, but I do believe it's going to be relatively smooth sailing from here on out. Religiously, not very much has been converted outside of the Americas, and even those aren't complete. But thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon.